All right. Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for sticking with us. Again, my name is Christopher Chan. I'm one of the current parliamentary interns, and I'm working this year. I'm working alongside MP Gort Johns. Just wanted to say how today marks the beginning of an important conversation, and so we're kicking that off with a fireside chat on the critical climate context leading up to the next federal election. And so we're here to explore what's at stake for youth and highlight the necessity for evidence-based climate policies. And so with that, I'm really excited to introduce our distinguished guest speaker, Senator Rosa Galvez. Senator Galvez, originally from Peru, is a leading expert in pollution control and its impacts on human health. With a PhD in environmental engineering from McGill, she served as a professor at Université Laval for over 25 years. Appointed to the Senate in 2016 for Quebec Bedford, she serves on the Standing Senate Committee for Energy, Environment, and Natural Resources and for National Finance. Senator Galvez has advised numerous international organizations and authored notable publications on environmental policy. Her latest initiative, Bill S-243, the Climate Aligned Finance Act, aims to guide Canada's financial sector towards a net zero economy. Now, let me introduce the session's moderator, a fellow parliamentary intern, Squawkwash Lillian. Squawkwash Lillian is a Nicola Klapma and Yakima youth from Thamshian, also known as Lytton, British Columbia. Squawkwash is deeply involved in climate advocacy and policy, serving in various capacities such as co-chair of the Environment and Climate Change Canada Youth Council and board member for Youth Climate Lab. She brings a fresh perspective to climate communication and youth engagement. Squawkwash is dedicated to creating safe spaces for youth and promoting decolonizing policies in education. So to learn more about Senator Galvez and Squawkwash's backgrounds, please check out their profiles at AirMeet. Now, Senator Squawkwash, please take it away. The floor is yours.
Thank you, Chris, for the introductions. Before we start, towards the end of the session, we'll open the floor up to a Q&A, allowing the audience to engage and ask questions using the Q&A function. So please have your questions ready. Senator Galvez, in the light of the recent Fourth Intergovernmental Negotiating Committee meeting on legally binding plastics treaty here in Ottawa, coupled with your statement in chambers regarding the plastics treaty, it's evident that Canada is deeply engaged in international committees and treaties. However, amidst these complex global initiatives, it can be challenging for youth to assess Canada's current standing on climate progress. To kick off our discussion, could you shed a light on how Canada's climate progress compares to other nations on the global scale?
Thank you, Sunshine, for the question. It's so important. So what happened with climate change is that it is a global issue, but we have to act locally without losing the perspective of the global, because there is only one atmosphere, there is only few oceans, and we have a big land, and we need to protect it because pollution travels. So let's start with the positive things. So in Canada, locally, there are some sectors that have done enormous work. And we have the construction sector, the building sector, the transport sector, the agricultural sector that has been reducing their greenhouse gas emissions. But all that effort, which is very important, unfortunately, it is all, how can I say, it's not wasted, but it's sadly overwhelmed by the greenhouse gas emissions that the oil and gas is putting in the atmosphere. So all these sectors doing all this job, unfortunately, are not neutralized, but even are overwhelmed by what the oil and gas is doing. And this is something that the international community of NGOs, of academics, of think tanks are telling us. So you have, for example, very recently, there is the Climate Change Performance Index, which evaluates different aspects of the climate action and put Canada at the 62 place. 62, very far. And the first one is Denmark, for sure, the Netherlands and this. But we should compare ourselves with the Scandinavian countries, which is Finland, Sweden, Norway, and they are doing much better. So there is something that we are not doing. At the same time, you have Carbon Tracker, another organization that says that based on our policies, our current policies, based on our um, track of emissions, Canada is in the path for a hothouse scenario. And so it's not sufficient. It's completely insufficient. And then you just have yesterday the Banking for Climate Chaos that says that all our banks in Canada are financing the fossil fuels. So this is very interesting because we are um, countering the good actions with counter actions that take us in a bad situation. Of course, also we live in different provinces, and there are provinces that are in a better shape. There are provinces that are in not so good places. Forest fires are there already. They were dormant during the winter, and they are coming out. So these multiple crises we need to tackle as a whole government approach and fast.
Thank you. That was a really great brief overview, and I think could definitely go so much more into which intersects with numerous environmental challenges. What do you perceive as Canada's most pressing environmental issues? You touched on this a bit, but could you highlight where Canada is leading in addressing these issues, and as well as those where the country may be falling behind?
Yes. So I think that, well, first of all, thank you so much for giving me the opportunity to talk to young people. Having been in academia for 32 years, I love and adore talking to young people. Apart from that, just a small parenthesis, I was supporting a bill to lower down the voting age, because if we live in Canada where a young person can decide to go to the army, can decide to buy a beer, can decide to buy cannabis, why they cannot decide to vote? For me, this is important that you know that I support this. So coming back to your question, so the planet, is finite. It's finite and it has finite resources. So when you combine a fine planet with a fine resources with the economic model that has nothing to do with the physics of our planet, and this economic model tells you, let's grow infinite, assuming that there is infinite resources. So what do you expect is at the point there's going to be a clash, and we are at this clash. So the planet has so far 9 mechanisms that makes hospitable the planet to human beings. So we have an stable climate that could be predicted with the seasons. We have the ocean is near 7 pH, no acidic, no basic, allowing for life in the ocean. We have a biodiversity, incredible biodiversity that has a rich web food. But we are disturbing these 9, and I cannot talk about all of them, but we are disturbing them, and we are bringing into tipping points of non-return. So Canada in the world stage is, very present in the COPs, climate change, in the biodiversity, Montreal Cumming, in the plastic this year, in the pollution. Plastic, I will put it in the pollution. And it's there. But unfortunately, we are not going as fast as we need to go, and we are not as ambitious. And I know, coming from academia, that science progresses fast, then engineers come later, and then much, much later behind are policymakers. And so we have to now run because we are being left behind. And when you compare our environmental policies with that one of Europe, we are, some people say we're 5 years behind. If you compare it with Norway or Finland, that I said that are closer to our economy, we are 3 years behind. So why is that? I think that the forces that influences the decisions of the politicians are not balanced. You have a lot of lobbying from oil and gas present at the COPs, present at the biodiversity, present at the plastic, and sometimes they are even in bigger numbers than the delegates. So this is something that we have to look at. And of course, we have to listen to indigenous people because they have been here before us, and they know when the nature is suffering.
Amazing. I like how you touched a little bit on the science and the background. So I'm going to dig into that a little bit deeper. Senator engineering and policy making comes last. And policy making, why is it crucial for policies to be grounded in scientific research to effectively tackle environmental challenges to ensure ecosystem sustainability?
This is very interesting question. As a scientist, I used to believe that, you know, we were ahead because of what I just said. I said that science is ahead. But now, knowing more and more about traditional knowledge, I think that we are behind traditional knowledge in so many specific areas. There's no time to give examples, but I think that we are very childish still civilization because we haven't learned how to live in harmony with nature. We don't think in terms of 7 generations, and it has to happen very bad things in order for us to do that. I have 3 children, but I have 3 grandchildren. And at a point, in the head of the people, we must say that we are not going to die and bring all our goods with us. We have to think in what we live. We have to think that we borrow the air, the water, the nature, whatever nature produces, we borrow from the next generations. And that even with natural resources, I have seen islands in the world. I have seen small nations dig on their natural resources. Once they're gone, they're gone. And that's it. It's a stop there. The way we have to see things is that it has to be a more sustainable and even more than sustainable. Because when I think about mining, whether for the critical minerals that we are going to rush and get, or for the typical copper, lead, zinc, gold, or even for the oil and gas, there is this curve that also has an inflection point. And in the past, mining of natural resources, not renewable, we have been just extractivism, extracting, knowing back in our heads that, for example, for oil and gas, nature took millions of years to put that there, millions of years. And we just take it and we burn it in the car in seconds. So it's like we are dissonant with respect to these things. So once we get rid of these natural resources and we burn it, we're not going to have it back. And so we are depriving future generations of that. So we did a lot of damage to nature because it was extractivism. Just do it, just extract it, just sell it. And then we became aware that we had to remediate, that we have to be more efficient, that we have to be get more cost benefits. Okay. And then sustainable development came, and sustainable development is net zero impact, net zero. Okay, let's don't impact. Let's use it only what we need. But because we have all these past negative, we really have to go beyond the sustainability, and we have to go into regeneration. We have to regenerate whatever we had as renewable resources. And of course, landfills are filled with copper, with zinc, with nickel, because we throw everything in landfills. And people are saying, well, eventually we'll have to go to landfills to pick up these natural resources. So inefficient, so inefficient. So we have to change our linear economy to circular economy. And we have to be more than sustainable. We have to be regenerative.
Thank you for that. I really liked in the beginning how you mentioned the 7 generations and our And here, with the significant presence of youth and civil society organizations in our audience, what role do you believe civil society orgs and youth should play in identifying and addressing these policy gaps at the federal level?
So my dream will be that we adopt open parliaments. The theory on open parliaments means that the society also can come with legislations, not only the House of Commons, not only the senators, but also civil society can come, because we have dead angles. We cannot have a whole holistic view. And so when society comes and tell us, oh, you are forgetting about this, we should have that. Unfortunately, we are not there, but hopefully, if with your help, there will be this possibility. I see a lot of anxiety in young people, and my solution to that is be in the action. When everything just passes in the head, is not it's not good enough. We have to be in the action, and the action can be very small at your house level, at your municipal level, or at the provincial level. And I know that now ministers, they all have youth advisors. So you should try and be there. And of course, the question is civil disobedience. I think that media, young people have powers that they need to be used in order to influence the politics, especially in the areas where we are not listening, because the lobbying of the business as usual and the lobbying for the profit today, as much as we can, is still very present.
Thank you. We'll try for one more question, and then we'll move to Q&A. Under discussion in the Senate, could you shed a light on any legislative movements aimed at fostering equity and environmental concerns?
I'm very happy that the government is modernizing some of the old legislation. Take, for example, the impact assessment was modernized. Take the Canadian Environmental Protection Act was modernized. I sponsor for the government the Net Zero 2050, and we had the carbon tax. So I think that we are modernizing these things and we are progressing on these things. But remember that in 1992, most of our environmental legislation was just destroyed. So it's not like we are progressing a lot, it's that we are correcting things of the past and we are trying to put more things. There is another one on sustainable jobs that hopefully will pass this summer. And the one that I have tabled is on aligning the financial sector with our climate commitments. Because what happened is, as I mentioned at the beginning of my conversation, is that the banks are are very bad. Are instead of putting $4 in renewable energy for $1 in oil and gas, they are doing exactly the opposite. They are putting $1 in renewable energy and $4 in oil and gas, and so there is a huge divestment movement in Canada. Pension plans, teacher plans, university plans, they withdrew from financing oil and gas. But then the banks were 5 banks, they came and they fill up the gap. So we are not moving in that. And so since few years, our 5 banks appear in among the first 20 financiers of oil and gas. And I know that they are saying, well, our oil is better than the one in Saudi Arabia because it respects human rights and things. But in reality, the last barrel of oil will be not the cleanest, but the cheapest, because that's what people look for. And also, another question that I invite people to ask is, who owns the oil and gas in Canada? And it's not Canadians, it's the Americans, it's UK, it's a little bit of China. And so I don't see the trickle down economy. And to give a clear example of this is that I go to Norway, I go to CAPS, and we talk about the sovereignty funds. Sovereignty funds. Do you know that Norway's sovereignty fund is inspired in the Alberta sovereignty fund? So Norway is paying its transition with its sovereignty funds. Alberta doesn't have much of sovereignty funds, nothing. And so how are they going to pay? And so we should ask the banks how you keep lending and investing in oil and gas if this oil and gas, according to International Energy Agency, we have to leave it in the ground. If your pipelines and your refineries and all these other, it's going to be stranded assets because renewable energy is growing fast. Renewable energy is not influenced by geopolitics because it's local. Renewable energy has become the cheapest and the cleanest and the safest. So, for those four reasons, renewable energy is considered deflationary. On the opposite, oil and gas, which is becoming more and more expensive to extract, which has to go with transmission, which is influenced by geopolitical issues, which now today there are all kinds of oil, very heavy, very light, and all of this make it increasing. And if we put the carbon capture and storage, it's going to be even more expensive. So all of this makes of this industry inflationary. So when we talk about inflation, shouldn't we look for deflationary uh, industry? So these things are very logical, and we are not facing an opposition that uses logic. We are facing an opposition that uses ideology, which I do very bad. If you ask me, I do very bad with ideology.
Thank you. So we're going to go to Q&A now. So I have senators seem to be a bit more inaccessible to youth than MPs. Can you give youth advice on how to have these important conversations in the upper and lower chamber?
Yes, so I've been pushing for modernization of the Lobbying Act. So I said that several environmental legislation we are modernized. Some ones are modernized for the very much good, but others are modernized not necessarily completely for the good. But nobody is touching the Lobbying Act. And the Lobbying Act just says that if a lobbyist calls or visit a politician, they have to register and they have to put what is the subject that it was touched. That's all. But if I decide to call a lobbyist, nobody takes care of that. So, so somebody from outside can call me and say, oh, can you call this person? And I will call them and nothing will be done. And I was so amazed very recently when I went to see the log of lobbyists, and I saw that my bill aligning finances with climate commitments was the subject of a lobbying on 4 or 5 different occasions. And nobody told me that. So that is unethical. If you're talking about my things, well, I should be informed of these things. So, like, I should know what the lobbyist is telling the politician so I can clarify with the politician what things are true, what things are not true, and clarify these things. And so then we need a lot more transparency. The other thing is that we have, of course, people will say, oh, there is a lot of environmental NGOs. There is a lot of them. Yes, there is a lot, but you are comparing, peanuts with a lots of kilos of carrots because they have a lot of resources. When they send oil and gas, send their lobbyists, they send lawyers, 5, 6, 7, while the NGOs send one person representing several. So the the force is completely different. We cannot compare them. And so we need more transparency because we don't know. And the other thing that my bill tried to address is that the boards of these very important players in the finances, the oil and gas, the banks, the pension plans, the insurers, they all chair boards members. So one person can sit in the oil and gas and can sit in the pension plan or can sit in the oil and gas. And you ask, how can you wear one hat and get to the next room and wear the other hat? And so these ethicals, we need to go back to principles and to ethics if we want to solve this issue.
Amazing. So we have about 4 more minutes. So we'll try and get through some of these questions here. You mentioned the power and oil gas lobbying being a major reason why Canada is behind of other wealthy countries on climate action. Do you have any ideas how to stunt the power of these lobbyists?
Well, as I said, we need to modernize the Lobbying Act. We haven't, and nobody, I think it's a hot potato, and politicians don't want, because there is a tacit understanding between our two major parties that they will just exchange. You know, one day is conservative, the next is liberal. So I know that they punch each other, but only to a certain extent, because they know that the next time they're going to be in power, so they don't want to ruffle the rules so much. So that's one thing. And the other thing is to ask. There is access of information. There are other laws that can help us in access of information. Even though it takes time, it is very important that we get the information. And educate yourself, read from different. I know it's difficult today to have the right information, but it's the same thing for myself. So I try to read different things about the same subject, so like I have at the end the real picture.
Thank you. So the next question is, as noted, Canada's big five retail banks still rank as some of the largest fossil fuel investors in the world. The federal government has proposed the sustainable finance taxonomy as a solution. What do you want to see in an effective taxonomy?
Very interesting question. So just to explain, taxonomy is a classification system. They took the idea from the biology. You know, we divide insects from all kinds of animals and vertebrates, and all of this is the taxonomy. So what it wants to tell you is that to say, okay, this is green, these are really green technologies, and these are gray or dirty technologies. So like the investors are going to choose normally the green technology. And there is 47 countries, including Kenya, that has already its taxonomy in the world. Canada is lagging again. We don't have a taxonomy. It's been 4 years. Somebody started a group of stakeholders. But when you have in the stakeholders the oil and gas, how do you expect that taxonomy is going to be green? No, it's not going to be green. It's going to be green, gray, and black. And they were going to call it transition taxonomy. But we have been already in the transition. This is something that I said many times, is that as a professor in engineering, I've been teaching about the transition for the last 20 years. And most of our students that were good in the transition renewable energy left to the States, to Europe, because here we are slowly. Why is it that in Canada, with the longest coastline, we don't have one single project in tidal or in waves electricity? Why? And it's because there is this lobbying, like in Alberta, they forbidden the new projects on renewable energy. So that's the situation. And the taxonomy should be green only. And because there is not, there is a fight, because the people that develop it with oil and gas stakeholders, they put some things that are not agreeable, like including, it seems that there is, in a previous work, there is a recommendation by this group to construct more oleoducts, more pipelines. So how this is coherent with the green transition? It's not. So I think at the point government must have to admit that populations are not silly. they are understanding more and more. Like, for example, that carbon capture and storage is a technology that has been in the development for the last 40 years. And if the oil and gas wanted to develop it, they are obtaining record profits, so they can develop if they wanted, not ask for more subsidies. Just last year, Canada gave $23 billion to the oil and gas. Can you imagine how much we could have developed in renewable energy, in massive public transport electrification? So we have to change the flow of the money from here to renewables in order to be in the transition.
Thank you. That's a great answer. So unfortunately, we're out of time, but I thought just to end this,
Sorry, you were cut. You said.
oh, sorry. In one sentence, what piece of advice would you give to the youth here today?
Yes, please be in the action as little as it is, and inform yourself from different sources, and contact your politicians. My door is always open. I have a website. You can read a lot. I know I receive a lot of emails, but when I will for sure. Youth for me, it's extremely important. So please, with my arms open, come and we will keep talking. Thank you.
Sunshine has lost it until the very end, but Senator.
That was good.
Some tech issues, but thank you so much, Senator Galvez, for your time, insight, and leadership for the climate. Coming up is another fireside chat with MP and Parliamentary Secretary Adam Van Coverden. So we will see you all in 5 minutes. Thank you, Senator Rosa Galvez.
I have to go. Yes. Take
care.
Yes,
thank you so much. Bye.